Hi, I'm Ash from Hidden Sunk Games, and today we're going to be taking a look at Ravensburger's Scotland Yard. So in a minute I'm going to look through the rules and a review of this game, but first of all I just want to say that I'm now on Twitter, and you can find me at Hidden Sunk Games. I've been having a whale of a time the last few days on there. I've got some cool photos of games, some short reviews on there, and I've also been retweeting some really cool stuff from the board game world, so please do follow me at Hidden Sunk Games. Anyway, back to Scotland Yard. Do you know, when I was a kid, like young, single digits young, I remember going to Hamleys with my mum, and I remember I saw this game, Scotland Yard, for the first time. And it was probably in a different box back then, because that was many years ago. But I do remember picking it up, and I do remember looking at the back and seeing the board and the pieces, and it was the board that really kind of intrigued me. And I all these years later, I still remember that, and that is actually one of the reasons why I decided to buy Scotland Yard. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the rules, have a look at what you get, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on Scotland Yard. So anyway, let's take a look. Okay, so this is Scotland Yard. And as I just said, it was actually this game board that first got me curious about the game. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to lift it up so you can get a better view of it. It is of course depicting London. And you can see there's some cool landmarks as well. The Tate Britain, Houses of Parliament, just up from that, County Hall. Lots all over the board, so that's quite cool. And the Thames, of course, running through it. And what you can see is these little circles are kind of location points. Now I'm going to describe those in a second, but just notice that, that some are all yellow, some are half yellow and half green, and some half yellow, half green with a bit of red in the middle. I'll explain that in just a minute. So what you get with the game, of course, you get this nice board here. What you also get is for 2 to 6 players, so you get a number of character pieces, each with a little colour on the top, and you get a ticket card. Now there's a few of these different colours. Let me show you those. So for this example I'll use the red one. Then you get some transport icons. Now there's 3 ways to get around this board: London Underground, a bus, and via taxi. Okay, so let me tell you what the objective of the game is. The objective of the game is to capture Mr. X. Now one character is going to be Mr. X, and only one. Mr. X is always going to be this character piece with the silver top, more kind of translucent. So someone decides that they're going to be Mr. X, and the rest of the players are going to be detectives. Now what's cool about this game is if there are 2 or 3 other players, to make it fair, then you can use an extra 2 pieces. So basically one player can control another piece and the other player can control another. So you can, even though there could be 2 detectives, they can have 2 extra characters. And the way you know what your extra ones are is you get these little rings, so you just pop one over the top. So for example, this will be the main detective player, and he will have another icon to use, which will be a policeman. But that's only if there's another 1 or 2 extra players. If there are more, then you don't use the police. They're all detectives. So what happens basically, I'm just going to remove these from the board just for a second, is Mr. X. Let's break it down. We'll start with Mr. X. So Mr. X is given this cool board here. Now what Mr. X does is, or his goals is to evade capture for 24 turns. Okay. Now with a pen, he will write down each of his movements around the board, and he always has to move, okay? And that's why those numbers are on the circles. So here is number 169, 156, 157, down there 170, you get the picture. He will select a start point, okay, and he does that with some other counters. He will select a start point, and he'll keep that a mystery for anyone else. So he won't actually put his counter down. Let's say it's 154. He won't actually put the counter down, but what he will do is on number 1 write 154, okay? Then basically he moves around the board trying not to get captured, okay? The detective pieces are always going to be on the board. So he moves around the board trying to evade getting captured. But what's really cool is that on goes number 3, 8, 13, 18, and of course his last go, 24, he has to reveal himself. That's why he actually has a player piece in the first time. So he'll move around the board, no one will know where he is, he won't even be on the board, and then when it's his third go, he will write down the destination that he's on, and he will actually put his counter down. So if it's number 133, he'll write 133 there and put his counter on 133, revealing himself. That way the detectives know that he is there, okay? Let's switch to the detectives just for a second. So each detective, as I say, will get this ticket counter, and they will start with 4 underground tokens. Let's just randomly grab, 4. Let's say that's 4. Bus, he'll get 8, so pretend that's 8. And taxi, he'll get 11. Again, pretend that's 11. That is the detective's way of moving around the board, and of course their pieces will actually always be on the board, okay? The way they will move is they will cash in a counter to get around. Let's start on this icon here, 170, which is all yellow. Now the only way he can move from that spot, because it's all yellow, is via a taxi icon, okay? There's not a bus stop there, there's not an underground there. So he has to cash in a taxi icon, which goes into a draw pile, and he can move basically 1 point away. He can move down there, he can move across there, or he can move up there. Those are the only moves that he can do. So I could cash in that, move up here to square 157. Now on 157, it's half yellow and it's half green, meaning that once again, I could use a taxi to get around to, again, an adjacent square, or I could take a bus. And the cool thing is by taking a bus is I might be able to move a bit further. I won't be able to move further if I go to my left there, but I will actually be able to skip this square and move straight to 142 if I move to my right. And again, I'd cash in that bus token into the draw pile. Even better is when you're on a subway icon, I can move all the way from 140 to there, which is square number 153, or all the way down here to 128. And again, you guessed it, I would cash in this, this ticket there. Now, this all goes into a draw pile, and it's from that draw pile that Mr. X, the character playing Mr. X, draws from. So essentially, he kind of he gets an unlimited number of tickets because there will already be a number of these left over once you deal these out. So he's at a huge advantage. Basically then, so the detectives are trying to guess where Mr. X is. Mr. X is moving around the board and only revealing where he is on these circled numbers there. And when he reveals himself, of course, that way the detectives, they can work together, they can communicate and try and close him off. And if they land on the number that Mr. X is on, he has to reveal where he is, okay? And that is basically where the detectives win. If Mr. X evades capture right up until turn number 24, then he wins, okay? And what Mr. X will do is every move he makes, as well as writing down the number that he lands on, he will put his method of transport on there, okay? Now that way the detectives can roughly kind of know where he is. It's very hard. But if there's a subway, if he takes a subway, or underground I should say, somewhere, that's a good indication because there's not many of those on the board. So it is a bit of, working out where he could be, especially then when he reveals himself. So yeah, that's kind of just a rough breakdown of the rules. Mr. X does get a couple of extra counters as well he can use, so the odds are really in his favour. He can have 2 goes back to back, cashing that in, and he also can hide one of his movements. So as I just said, the underground, there aren't many of those, so he might want to hide that movement, in which case he can play one of these. He only gets a couple of those, so he should use those wisely. Anyway, what did I think of the game? Let's find out. So what do I think of Scotland Yard? Well, I know it's the 3rd time I've mentioned this, but I really like the look of this game. I really like this game board, and you've got to remember, I was a kid when I first saw this game in Hamleys in London. And, you know, it definitely planted a seed in my brain because years later, I still remember that moment when I saw, the box with the picture of the board on. And I was really excited, and I eventually ended up buying the game. So I really like the look of the board. Some people may argue maybe it's a bit too cartoony. It could have been done to be a bit more realistic. But for me, I like it the way it is. I like the player pieces. I think they're good quality. I like Mr. X's tracking sheet. My one quibble is that there isn't very much paper in here, so you'll have to then kind of cut out your own sheets and use. And what I also like is the ticket board and the actual counters for transport. I think they're good quality card. I have played other games with similar tokens where they use a lot thinner card and the slightest knock and it gets creased. These are really good, really sturdy. So the overall quality of the game definitely gets a thumbs up from me. How does it play? Well, I certainly like the premise of the game, the whole trying to capture Mr. X and Mr. X evading and you not knowing where he is on the board and you having to kind of think about, what moves he's previously done. I like all that. What I don't like is that the odds are so heavily stacked in favour of Mr. X. It's unbelievable, like really, really heavily stacked. Let me explain that for a second. So each detective will start with these set number of counters, as I've said, 4 underground, 8 buses and 11 taxis. Now what the rules state is once they've run out of kind of said tokens, they can't use those again. So if you run out of taxis, you can't take a taxi. If you run out of buses, you can't take a bus. Now that's really tough. And if you think about it, if you're on a counter that is just a taxi, yeah, you're kind of screwed. You have to forfeit a turn. And you just got to hope that you've got other counters where you can actually still move around. Now, whenever you cash in a token, so let's say I cashed in an underground token here to move a detective, this token then goes into an open pot. Now, there's already tokens in that open pot because you don't use all of them for the detectives. There will still be loads left over. And it's from that open pot that Mr. X uses his tokens or her tokens, okay? So that open pot, that draw pile, as I call it, is never ending, okay? Because every time Mr. X will use one, a player will put a new one in. It is never ending. So whereas players are limited by where they can move and how they can move, Mr. X actually has no limitations, okay? And as I said, the odds are stacked so in their favour that this game is really hard to beat Mr. X. Now there is a way around this, and one thing I'm really keen on, not just in this game but other games, is tweaking the just because the rulebook says do it this way, you don't have to. You can adjust rules to make the play a bit more easier or harder. This is one of those games where I think a little rule tweak can actually make the game more enjoyable. So instead of Mr. X having all this free reign like he currently does and the odds so in his favour, what I think you should do, and what I certainly do, is I limit, just like I do with the detectives, limit the amount of counters that he can use. You could follow the exact pattern that a detective uses, or you can create it so maybe it's just a little bit in his favour. You come up with your own numbers. Then the game becomes a lot more enjoyable to play because, quite frankly, it's a lot easier then to win. It's more of a challenge. It's more of a challenge for Mr. X to evade capture. And that's when the game becomes good. So judging on the way the rules are written, then this game actually falls short. But with a few slight tweaks, this game is a lot more fun to play. And that is how I recommend you play this game. I'm going to have more rules, reviews and first looks coming very soon. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you later.